I'm Greg Collins. I'm the Chief Learning Scientist of NIIT, which is a learning outsourcing company. And we've been doing a great deal of work with the application of generative AI to learning, particularly learning content. We're going to talk today about some of the things we've learned and about some of the applications we see for AI. So I'll let my co-presenter Brandon introduce himself briefly, and then we'll dive in.
Hi there. I see a lot of familiar names, so I think a lot of us have been introduced. But my name is Brandon Dickens. I head up NIIT's user experience design team, and I've been working with Greg over the last 19, 20 months or so, setting up generative AI experiments, running them, helping synthesize the results, and also building a lot of backend infrastructure to help us do these experiments, pilots, and enterprise-wide rollouts. So with that, I'll hand it back to Greg.
Okay, and so let's go ahead and dive in. So I'll wait for the slide to come up. All right, so a quick personal note. So my background is actually in artificial intelligence. That was a long time ago before, oh, I've lost the slide. Hang on.
Sorry, we're having a little bit of a sharing
Well,
glitch.
I'll keep talking. Presumably the slide will come back. So yeah, so I got my PhD in artificial intelligence long before the generative AI revolution, kind of before it was cool to be in the field. But what that's mostly meant over the years, from my point of view, is that I'm the official debunker when it comes to AI tools. So in years since my education, there's been sort of wave after wave of AI hype cycles that turned out not to be all they were supposed to be. And my role at NIT has mostly been to kind of check these out and deliver the bad news. So about a year and a half ago, when ChatGPT made its big splash, I essentially thought this was going to be another hype cycle. So Brandon and I sat down to kind of explore the technology and see what it could do for learning. And, I did not expect that much. And much to my surprise, the first couple of experiments we did really kind of blew us away. I mean, they had us very quickly thinking, this is incredibly powerful technology. It's going to change a lot about learning. At the time, honestly, we hadn't been paying all that much attention to, the sort of news around this. So we started looking around at what some of the sort of knowledgeable, connected Silicon Valley type people were saying. And lo and behold, we found there were a bunch of people who were saying something along the lines of, this technology means it's the end for humans, and AI is taking over now. I thought that might be a little extreme, but we found even the more sober-minded commentators like Bill Gates, where Bill Gates said he'd seen two truly revolutionary technologies in his whole lifetime intact, and first being the graphical user interface, and the second was generative AI. So we came to think there was something to this, and we didn't just drink the Kool-Aid. We actually have a hold of something here that's going to change almost everything about what we do. So I'm going to take just a couple minutes and explain why we think that, and give a little bit of framework for thinking about the impact that we think that AI is going to eventually have on learning and development. And then we'll show you some of the experiments we did and talk about some use cases. So first of all, I'm sure people are familiar with this at this point, but just to lay the groundwork, I mean, most of the experiments we're going to talk about are with large language models. That is the generative AI tools that produce text. And you're almost certainly familiar with ChatGPT and the engine behind that. GPT 4.0 is the latest version of that. We also have been doing a lot of work with Claude Opus and the new Claude that's succeeding Opus. And But almost all the tech companies have entrants here. Gemini from Google, for example, Llama from Meta. And the reason why we focused on this and why most of our experiments have been with large language models is because they are, from our point of view, far and away the most mature generative AI technology right now. And by mature, what I mean is, they're controllable. We can get repeatable, reliable behavior out of them. At the same time, some almost equally exciting stuff. Oh, sorry, I meant to sort of introduce this. Just, I think everyone has seen this kind of thing, probably out in the press. People have been benchmarking large language models against almost every kind of human intelligence benchmark they can think of, and of course they've been quite impressive. But the one thing I want to note here is that if you look toward the bottom of this chart, you'll see tests that are basic, that are not just tests of basic reasoning. They're tests of knowledge, right? So, I mean, biology to a large extent, art history, certainly U.S. history, and somebody even tried the sommelier exam to see how much it knew about enology. And these results confirm one of the most important things we've observed, which is that these large language models seem to be experts on almost anything you can think of. That is, think of some obscure domain and probe the knowledge that's inside the large language model, and it's just astonishing what's there. And that's probably the single most crucial thing about this technology for learning, because in general, I think any of us who work in L&D, have come to realize that far and away the hardest thing about creating learning content is getting the content out of the minds of human subject matter experts and into some form that can be used to do training. And what the people who made these large language models have done, in a sense, they basically fed every document they could get their hands on into these models to train them. So in a sense, they've stripped mined the expertise of the entire world, and they've got it into these models. And and we'll show examples of this in a couple minutes, but that gives us an enormous head start on any kind of training we want to build, because most of the knowledge that we need to build that training is already in the model. In addition to large language models, I'm sure you've seen the AI tools that are designed to create images. And these are exciting. They do really cool stuff. You probably played with, perhaps DALL-E or Stability. But they're really sort of, they're not quite there yet. They're not quite mature, and if you've done much playing with them, you've seen this yourself. It's very hard to control them. You can't get them to give you exactly what you want. But the trajectory of improvement is astonishing. So, we did a little simple experiment. We took one of these models, Midjourney. The first version of Midjourney came out in February 2022. We gave it a simple prompt. We asked it, a kind of random prompt. We asked it to do a photorealistic image of a stage performance of Romeo and Juliet with 3 actors. And, if you look at what it did, it's terrible, right? I mean, it didn't even get the 3 actors right. And it doesn't look much like a photograph. It doesn't even look much like people. If you skip forward to version 4, here you see something that I wouldn't exactly say this is photographic. The faces look pretty weird if you look at them closely, but it sort of looks like a kind of mediocre illustration. Skip ahead from there to version 6, and this is just December 2023. And that, to me at least, is convincing. I mean, if you told me that was a photograph of a real production, I would believe it. So if you look at the improvement there, right, from the thing on the left to the thing on the right in less than 2 years, that's pretty astonishing. And that gives a sense of, where this technology is going, in the near future. It's going there very fast, and it's very soon going to make a huge impact. Perhaps the biggest impact, from those kind of image generation technologies is going to be the ability to generate synthetic video. And, again, you probably played with Synthesia, maybe a couple of these other tools. Right now they can make something that looks like basically talking head video. It's extremely convincing. It's very impressive, but it's kind of limited and it takes a while to do. But in the not too distant future, we're going to see tools that have the ability to create complex video in real time. And that's going to be a watershed event, we believe, for training and for a lot of other industries. It's going to be possible to create game and simulation-like activities where the learner or the user is interacting with a simulated world in real time and seeing that world play out in what looks like high definition video, responding to everything they do instantaneously. That's going to be just amazing, the impact it's going to have. So quick notes on what we've found. We've been doing experiments here for about a year and a half. Technology has lived up to the hype, especially the text generation, large language models. We've noticed during this period that the tech companies are basically all in financially. Microsoft has gone above $100 billion committed to this technology, and other big tech companies similarly all in. That's an important sort of indicator of how much they believe in it. The technology is changing and improving incredibly fast. Every week there's an improvement somewhere. Our clients, big companies in all different kind of industries, are basically all preparing for a tech revolution, not just in learning, but across the board. That's going to affect how they do finance, how they do marketing, everything else. And everybody's talking about it. If you look at learning in particular, though, so far real instances of deployment of AI-based training at scale are few and far between. Most people are still in a kind of experimental mode. We've heard that corporate IT groups are a bottleneck here. They've sort of ring-fenced the technology and they're putting up rules. And not inappropriately, it's their job to keep people safe, but that's sort of slowed the experimentation that might otherwise be happening. We see L&D leaders who are looking for guidance. They know they're going to have to make big changes in how they do things based on the availability of AI. They're not sure exactly what changes they should be making. Hopefully we'll add some, shed some light on that today. We notice that many people seem to have a sort of limited sense of what AI can do. And in particular, that limited sense centers on help bots. That is the idea that, you give something to a learner where they can ask a question and get a coherent, English or whatever your language is, answer back to that question. It's sort of natural to see it that way. That's essentially how ChatGPT and other sort of public interfaces work. It also sort of harkens back to how, search engines before them, like Google, worked. But, for us, that's only scratching the surface. So there's kind of an imagination lag between how people think AI is going to perform in learning and how it's really going to perform. Finally, most people in L&D kind of believe that a big change is coming at this point. I think it's safe to say. Not everybody's happy about it. So, we were in London some time ago at a conference of chief learning officers, and, they were joking at the bar after the sessions that several of them were that, they were hoping they retire before they had to actually deal with all this stuff in their operation. But that's probably not going to happen. Essentially, the technology's here now. The large language models are already, incredibly capable and ready to go. So, as Bain and company said in their report, we're all kind of out of time to wait and see on AI. So, to sort of help make sense of this and find a way forward, we've put together a maturity model. Looking at the kinds of, in very general terms, at the use cases for AI in L&D. It's super simple. There's 4 levels. The lowest level we called accelerate, and the point here is just that the most obvious thing when you start playing with these large language models is they're incredibly fast. They're at least 20 times as fast as a human being to create sort of equivalent content. They're probably even faster than that, and they're getting faster all the time. So the most obvious use of this is to just speed up what we do now. So if you take all the kind of content, all the operations we have around building content, all the content generation steps could be made much faster by having a AI, sort of help the humans who need to create the content. The second level, though, we call elevate. And the point here is that, if we're honest, in corporate L&D, most of the learning that we produce is not as good as it could be from an instructional design point of view or from a learning science point of view. Almost everything that gets made is a compromise between, the best kind of learning we know how to produce and all the pragmatic constraints we have, time constraints, money constraints, cost constraints, and subject matter expertise, availability constraints, which loom large. So the AI can overcome all of those constraints to a large extent. It massively speeds up the time. As a result, it massively reduces the amount of money it takes to build a given amount of training. And, as I said toward the beginning, it can substitute to a large extent for what we normally do with subject matter experts. And because of that, it's going to be possible to build much more training that's like the best kind of training we know how to build now. And, so that's immediately going to cause, we believe, a sort of a wave of elevation in the sort of quality of the training that we can offer people. But the third step here is where things really get interesting. We call it transcend. And, this is using AI to interact directly with learners. So we create a learning experience by having an AI play the role of a Socratic tutor, do a role play with learners, create a sort of mini simulation and take learners through it and let them, kind of work on a challenging problem and give them coaching, give them feedback. The AI can do all kinds of things in real time, that are, we build into the best learning we can create now, but it can do it, because it can do them in real time, because it can come up with challenge problems, because it can coach learners through them and give them the consequences of their decisions in real time. The AI can adapt itself, to exactly what the learner is thinking and exactly the path they're moving on to sort of master a skill. So as a result, we're going to be able to create learning experiences we could never create before. I mean, all new, totally different way of learning, and that's gonna cause an enormous change when we are able to deliver these at scale, which is going to be very soon. The technology is there. We just have to kind of build the infrastructure, and we'll talk about building the infrastructure a little bit more later. The last level we call unify, and the point here is just that once we've developed all of these amazing new ways that people can learn by interacting with an AI, it's going to be possible to have a single AI that has mastered all of those techniques and is able to deploy them, in a given situation as needed to sort of create the best possible path for a learner. And it's going to be possible to have that AI be focused on a single human learner. So you will have an AI that's your coach that will dedicate itself to getting you trained up in whatever skill set you need to learn. And that AI is going to learn about you in the process. So it's going to learn what works for you, what gets you excited, what motivates you, what kind of examples and illustrations work for you, and so on and so forth. So that's what we think is going to be the future of learning. We think in 5 years, instead of thinking of learning as something where you go to a catalog of courses and you pick the ones you want or need to take, corporate learning is going to be something where you essentially connect with your AI tutor, and your AI tutor tells you what your today's learning work is going to be. And so that's what we mean. We say we think AI is going to change everything about learning. So one quick point, and then we want to show you some examples. But the last point we want to make before that is that, when we talk about this to a lot of people in L&D, there's a certain, not surprisingly with a new powerful technology like this, there's a certain sort of, fear-based reaction. Could this be the end of L&D? I mean, if large language models are so amazing at creating content and they do it so fast and so cheap, what do L&D people in the future do? And, we have a pretty positive take on this. And I think it's justified when you look at what happens when really big technology revolutions occur in reality. Just to pick one, as an illustration, if you look at the development of the, passenger car, arguably starting in 1908 with the introduction of the Model T Ford, which is $850 apparently, and when it was first released. The when right after that point where cars first hit the market, there were huge sweeping technology revolutions, arguably as big as the AI revolution is going to be. The electronics revolution, the plastics revolution, changed everything about the technology for making cars. And what did not happen as a result of that is that we kept making Model Ts, but just made them faster and faster and cheaper, right? So it didn't turn cars into a commodity. Instead, what happened was that we took all this amazing new technology and we kept reinventing what a car even was. So if you took the best kind of car we could create today, and if you could transport it in a time machine back to 1908, it would be science fiction, right? I mean, people would have trouble even understanding what it is at first. And we believe that's what's about to happen, or what is in fact currently happening in learning. That AI is going to let us reinvent what it means to do learning. Create amazing ways to much more effective ways to help people learn. And there's an enormous opportunity here. I mean, it's going to change what jobs in L&D are about. It's going to change jobs that focus on simply writing content into jobs that are more concerned with how do we deploy this powerful technology to sort of create the future of learning. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon, and we'll show you quickly some of the experiments we've done and what we think we learned from them.
Awesome. And before I move on, Shivani, were there any questions in the last section that we might pause and address now, or?
No questions yet, but the chat is
Okay.
open, so please feel free
Okay.
to add your comments. Thank you.
Cool. And we will try to leave a little time at the end. So if you do have questions, we'll get to them. And if we can't get to them, we'll respond after the fact with a mail out of answers to questions. So please do put them in there. All right. So what I'm going to take you through next is, first of all, the kind of key research that we've done over the past 19, 20 months now or so. And then I'm going to move into kind of discussing how all of those experiments line up to answer some of the bigger kind of problems that we've historically had in L&D. And when Greg says that we think that that generative AI is going to be transformative, I mean, we really think it's going to change everything and really get at some of the biggest issues that historically we've had. So when we first started, as Greg said, we were debunking a hype cycle, we thought, and as the experiments kind of lined up and the results came in, it became very, very clear that this was a real technology. It was going to have a real impact. And so what I'll do next is I will walk you through kind of the key experiments we've run at each level of the pyramid, the maturity model, and just kind of show you the results that initially opened our eyes to sort of understanding what this technology was capable of and what it can do. We've run an enormous amount of experiments, so just in the interest of time, I'm trying to show sort of the key experiments, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more even beyond what I'm going to show you, and then again we'll move into describing kind of how these experiments, how the proof points come together to solve much bigger problems. So starting with Accelerate, our very first experiment here. Again, the one that initially kind of opened our eyes was an experiment in which we created a 90-minute awareness level course. And I'll show you that. I'll show you the actual output, and I'll tell you a little bit about the numbers, which is where that one is actually probably the most exciting. But the conclusions from the Accelerate phase, and this is the experiment I'm going to show you, and many others, and also live project work that we've done in this area. First of all, the models are super fast, almost inconceivably fast. We say 20x, it's more than that, but it's hard to quantify. Two, the models do give expert level content when you prompt them appropriately. And that was a big surprise because there's a lot of talk about hallucinations and so forth. It turns out that that's pretty controllable just through the prompting environment. Three, the copy is clean. So at this point, we've not seen typos, grammatical errors, usage errors, tonal shifts, anything like that pop up in the copy produced. And four, I mean, this one pained me to write the first time. My background is in instructional design, but I had to admit after the initial experiment that it looked a lot like what I would have written. And the writing of these models is really, really strong. So the starting conditions for the first experiment, we asked the model to create a script for us for a course on battery technology and the energy transition at the awareness level for managers who might be impacted by the energy transition. We wanted 90 minutes of content total. We let the model know we were going to be in Articulate Rise, so configure content for Rise native templates. We asked the model to provide or describe images that we should use. Create all the quiz questions for each module, create video scripts for module introductions and conclusions, so that we could run a little side test with the current state of the art in Synthesia. This was fall 2022 that we did this experiment. And I'll show you the actual output, and then I'll walk you through the numbers really quickly.
Welcome to Module 1 of our training on batteries and their usage in alternative energy.
So that is a Synthesia video, synthetic talking head. The script was produced by AI, and the video itself was produced by AI. The AI noted lots of different kinds of templates we should use inside of Articulate Rise, lots of different kind of interactives, gave us layout advice, so we have a kind of a wide range of layouts. The module quizzes are comprehensive across modules. The model gave us questions, right answer, wrong answers, feedback. It also gave us some technical content where technical content sort of made sense. So it was able to get down to chemical reactions happening in batteries where those make sense. We got a ton of Wikimedia and other open source Creative Commons images that it linked us to that we could use. It gave us lots of different layouts and animations, like I mentioned earlier. And then sort of interestingly, it decided on its own that we needed some additional reading. So it produced additional reading and stuff that learners could do and links to all that material. So it looks good. We were pleased with the results. It held up to subject matter expert review. The exciting thing really though is at the kind of numbers level. So we started this experiment 8 a.m. on a Thursday. This was fall 2022. Our script was complete by close of business that same day. We had one creative resource construct the course that took about 4 hours overnight. So when we woke up on Friday, we had a 90-minute awareness level course finished just exactly as you saw it. We haven't made any changes, including the double up of effort between Greg and I, who were both prompting on this one. The total course effort was 20 hours. So if you look at the current benchmarks from trainingindustry.com or those kind of places, typically you're looking at about 300 hours of development time, development effort for this kind of work. And so when you think about how dramatically this changes turnaround times, changes the effort that goes into these kind of basic courses, this is where we really started understanding that things were going to change in a very big way. Moving on to the Elevate phase, in Elevate, the kind of speed ups that we saw in Accelerate come along for the ride. So we really sat down and we thought, what is it about creating scenario-based learning, simulation-based learning, hands-on kind of learn by doing approaches that takes so much more time than standard learning does? And we really got down to two things. One is the SME interaction. You have an expert in simulation or scenario design. You have an expert in some esoteric field, a disease state, some technical process, some manufacturing kind of troubleshooting routine or something. And these two people have to become temporary experts in each other's field. Further complicating the matter, the subject matter expert has a full-time job, and so they disappear, for a month because they're on location doing something, and the project goes on hold. So there's lots of delays there. The second is on the drama side, basically the creative writing craft. When you start thinking about making scenarios or making learn by doing kinds of simulations, you're talking about something that's driven by a lot of dialogue, something that needs plot arcs, something that needs emotional resonance, that needs dramatic payoffs, plot arcs, all that kind of stuff. And when you really stack up the entire set of kind of skills you're looking for, you start realizing you're describing something a lot more like a Hollywood screenwriter than a typical L&D, kind of instructional designer or content developer. And so there's a lot of cycles that we lose just in trying to get that content right. And we think AI can really solve both of these problems, and we have a lot of proof points at this point. Just to run you through a couple of quick experiments to show you what I mean. When you're thinking about subject matter expert interaction, one of the most challenging things is really getting the scenarios, the kind of the grist for scenarios or simulations from the subject matter expert. You can often spend weeks or even longer doing that. Previously, kind of one of my examples of how fast you could get to a scenario, I did an oil well drilling simulator for Shell. They flew Greg and I out to The Hague. We spent a week locked in a room with the two biggest experts at Shell on oil well drilling, so you can imagine the average hourly rate in that room. And we spent the whole week. We came out with 10 scenarios detailed, and we felt really, really good about that. This changes everything. So we asked our model to create, just as an example, we've done this across almost every domain, every industry, a list of 20 key scenarios that apply to loan officers at a large bank. 15 seconds later, we have this full list assessing financial statements, navigating the loan application process, et cetera. I asked 19, give me 20 even more detailed versions of decision making and loan approval, making informed decisions on loan approvals. And right away, the model comes back with 20 more. So if I were to repeat this across the entire set, I now have 400 scenarios at this level, evaluating unconventional income, high debt to income ratios, et cetera. I took 19, green financing decisions, making loan decisions for projects focused on environmental sustainability, considering potential government incentives and long-term viability. I said, give me 20 highly specific variants of that. And the model came back with now down in the weeds, solar panel installation loans, deciding on loans for residential solar panel installations, taking into account local government tax incentives and energy savings projections. So think just being able to get down to this many scenarios this quickly is a huge deal. But it turns out the model has more to offer in this. So I took biomass energy production financing, biomass energy projects, assessing feedstock supply sustainability, energy production efficiency, and environmental regulations. And I said, give me all the information that I would need to have an excellent first discussion with a subject matter expert. And the model produced a completely detailed kind of outline of what I would need in that conversation, gives me a teaser that I can explain the concept with. Also got down to very, very granular details in the fact pattern. So biomass production plant, capacity 20 megawatts, aiming to supply electricity to 50,000 residents. It's going to need 100,000 tons of locally sourced agricultural waste. It's going to need 120 million investment. It's going to get a 20% investment tax credit. The operating efficiency rate is there. All the detailed steps that the learner is going to need to go through are there. Possible good and negative outcomes are there. So when you think about it, the initial sort of conversation with subject matter expert is also often, hey, we're doing something on green energy in loans. What are some good scenarios? And that's a very difficult conversation to manage. What we found is when we show up with, say, 10 scenarios detailed out to this level, and we say we've done some research, we've got some starting points, just want to walk you through them, get your thoughts. This is the kind of thing we're looking for. That weeks-long process of defining scenarios often collapse into that first meeting, and can sometimes actually conclude there certainly within 2 meetings, you usually have the scenarios detailed. So it's a huge speed up when it comes to the scenario-based learn by doing kinds of approaches you might want to use. On the dramatic side, this comes as a surprise to a lot of people because I think there's a misconception that large language models have a voice. They sound like AI. Well, they do if you don't ask them to sound like something else. But it turns out that you can basically get the model to respond in any tone and style that you can imagine and articulate. So just as one really quick example, I use this just because it's sort of easy to see. We work with Network Rail. They manage the rail systems across the UK. And they wanted to do a video on the impact of climate change on the UK rail system. And so we decided, okay, we'll do a video on this. We'll do it in the tone and style of An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore's documentary from the early aughts on climate change. Just as a reminder, this is the original tone. See that pale blue dot? That's us. It's our only home. What is at stake? Our ability to live on planet Earth, to have a future as a civilization. So dramatic, punchy, very, very discernible style. So the storyboard that the model produced for us is here, and I'll just zoom in on one spot to let you sort of hear the tone. Extreme rainfall, our track's silent enemy. Without warning, it erodes the very foundation our railways stand on. Ferocious winds assail our overhead wires, sparks fly, signals falter. Are we prepared for the blackout? And then there's the relentless sun, warping and twisting our tracks, rendering them unsafe and unusable. So it really managed to nail the tone, and we found this across a huge range of experiments. And by the way, just one last point on this. We also used, for this one, we fed the script back into Midjourney and asked it to create pencil sketches that would be appropriate for a storyboard, and it did that for us. That was kind of the state of the art at the time. Now, if we wanted to get photographic representations, as you saw earlier, that's also completely possible. So you can really do some cool things with the creative on this. So when you think about that, you can create the content extremely fast, as we saw in Accelerate. You can supplement the subject matter expert by using the large language model in that role to get a huge head start on kind of content acquisition. And you can refine the craft side of the writing really dramatically. We're at a point where the time to do the time it's going to take to do the very best things we know how to do today is going to shrink incredibly dramatically, and we've seen that in real project work all over the place. Now we're going to move to Transcend, and this is the last one I'm going to show you at the Unify level. There are a couple of key pieces of tech that are still outstanding, but they're coming very soon. Transcend is where we are using AI as the vehicle for learning. This is where the AI is actually going to interact directly with the learner and provide the learning in real time in a very personalized way. And I'll start with the conclusions, and then I'll show you 3 quick examples, and then we'll move on to some of the enterprise level cases that come together based on these proof points. The models are great coaches. They can get to know the learner. They can provide all kinds of Socratic or other kind of tutoring and coaching. They can take in external data. They can actually do function calling, so they do real work in the real world. And I'll show you a transcript from a very interesting project we're working through right now. 2, they're excellent role players, so they can play essentially any character role that you give them. They're very good at rule following in that role play. And then 3rd, they're great simulators. It turns out they can do better than kind of play a single character. They can effectively play an entire company or an entire market. They can track the kind of metrics that are changing across that organization throughout a simulation based on learners' inputs. And they can simulate all of the characters, all of the casts that would be present inside of that company that you're simulating. And I'll show you an example of each one of these. So on coaching, one of the things that we're seeing is that there's a kind of a blurring of the line between talent and learning that AI, generative AI, seems to be central to. So this is something that we're working through a concept for a large bank. And what they want to do is put an AI interface over the top of their talent and their learning systems. And this is a test environment that we've put together, actual transcripts from it. Here I'm playing the role of Priya, and I'm talking to Kara, the Career Advancement and Resource Advisor. I basically tell Kara that I'm ready for a change in my career. I don't have a full degree. What are my options? The model has access to the entire kind of talent ecosystem. So we have some sample data we've put in. It looks at the available roles and my resume and some other information that's in the system about me, suggests some options. I choose the marketing analyst role as something I'd like to explore. I get a learning path put together for me. Again, it has access to the metadata of the existing learning. And later on in this particular conversation, I'm actually enrolled in it. The model can actually do some function calling and enroll me. A little bit later on, so we fast forwarded the model a little bit, changed the data pattern. I come back in and I say, well, look, I did these, but there was a statistics piece that I just bombed. I don't feel like this is a good path for me. The model gives me some reassurance. It has access to facilitator notes and some other things. So it gives me some reassurance. It gives me a remediation path I can go on. It actually signs me up for that remediation path. A little bit later, in another dialogue, again, fast forwarding, changing the data, the model lets me know that there's actually a role that's opened up. That's the role that I'm preparing for. I express interest in it. And then the model goes through an entire coaching routine around how I can get all my materials in the best shape possible. This is a very big thing. This is the model not only providing information, but it's also now doing some light training and coaching around what it means to have a good resume, actually looking at my resume, giving me suggestions for how to improve it, how to write my cover letter, what the interview is going to look like and how I can prepare for it, even some role plays in it. I'm saving the role plays for the next one, though, where we talk about role plays. And then finally, I get the news that as we, again, move the needle forward a little bit on the timeline and change the data set, it turns out I've actually got through the first round. I'm now going to have an interview, and the model offers to do a bunch of prep work for me to really drill me on that interview process and make sure I show up and am prepared. So this ability of the model to get to know the learner, to have access to a set of data about the learner, about the talent ecosystem, about the training ecosystem, and then keep up to date a kind of a profile of the learner going forward, really enables a level of coaching that's just never been possible before. On the role plays, I would like to share this one. This is about a 4.5-minute quick clip of a role play scenario we built where generative AI is providing all of the content. So we basically put a very complicated prompt together and fed in a lot of information. And the model is now in this going to play angry customers calling in to a call center to complain about a cruise they went on with a particular cruise line. What's not completely clear, and I'll just make it clear before I let this run, all the content that you see aside from the stock image being used is being produced by AI in real time to whatever the learner says. So all of the customer responses are being generated based on whatever she says to it. The voice coming back is an AI voice, so the customer's voice is AI. The ratings are being produced against a rubric, the detailed coaching around those ratings also produced by the large language model around a rubric. Advice and info is being produced. The tracking of the learner's progress is being provided by the large language model. And even the customer detailed background information is being produced by the model. What you'll see uses a stock image to represent the customer. We do have proof points in place that use fluid animation of various types for that. Right now, the technology for that is fairly expensive, so we can do it, but there are kind of ongoing run costs they're quite expensive, which is why we're kind of waiting for the cost picture to come down a little bit before we start seeing things like real-time video in these playing the customer role. So I'll go ahead and let this one play.
Today we're going to be taking a look at a new AI-powered training simulator for call center employees. Let's check it out. Jumping in, we've got a call right away. Let's answer and see what happens. Hello, Carnival Cruise Lines, Alison speaking. How can I help you today?
Hello, Allison. My name is Sue. I want to discuss about the horrendous experience I had. Can you help me with that?
So here we have some information about our caller, Sue. She's got gold status. Let's find out what that means by clicking on it. She's done quite a bit of cruising. Since Sue's a regular customer, we definitely want to make sure that we keep her happy. Could you please explain some more about the issues that you had on your recent cruise?
The whole experience was simply catastrophic. There were several issues from delayed meals to rude staff, and worst of all, my special needs were not addressed properly. It was an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, this doesn't sound good, but what can we do about it? Let's get some advice. We can ask some advice about what we can do next. Okay, so the advice we're getting is to show empathy and to assure her that we'll be taking action to resolve her concerns in future. Okay, let's speak to Sue and see what she thinks. I'm really sorry to hear that, Sue, and on behalf of Carnival Cruise Lines, I would just like to apologise for the experience that you had. Thank you for reporting your concerns. We'll definitely be taking action to resolve those. Your feedback is absolutely invaluable to help us improve our services in future.
Thank you, Allison, for understanding. I hope you do something about it so that no other customer goes through what I had to endure.
We've addressed Sue's feedback, but what can we offer to make up for the bad experience and keep her coming back? Now, if we come over here and switch to the info mode, we can ask questions to find out a bit more. So some suggestions would be to offer her a discount on her next cruise, priority booking for trips, or offer a free meal or spa package. After Sue's last experience on a cruise, it sounds like the Serenity Spa package would be just the thing that she needs to relax. Well, we definitely want to make sure that your next cruise is memorable for all of the right reasons, Sue, and we would like to offer you on the next cruise our Serenity Spa package, which includes a massage, facial, and access to the thermal suite for the entirety of the cruise. How does that sound to you?
Oh, that does sound wonderful. I've never had a chance to try the spa package before. Thank you. This gesture means a lot.
Great, Sue seems happy and our ratings are 5 out of 5, so let's go ahead and close out the call. You're very welcome, Sue. Is there anything else that I can help you with today?
No, that'll be all for now. Thank you for hearing me out and offering the spa package. I look forward to a better experience next time.
So that's what can happen when things go well. But the really cool thing about this being AI powered is that you can say anything and it will respond. Check this out.
Hello, Allison. This is Ken. I've had the most terrible experience on your cruise, and I'm infuriated. My cabin was untidy when I checked in, and I found bed bugs. I demand compensation.
Right, first of all, take a breath and calm down. I'm sure it wasn't that bad.
Are you joking, Allison? It wasn't just bad. It was a nightmare. I can't believe this is how you treat your customers.
And let me guess, you're calling up now because you just want to get a load of free stuff from us.
You're way offline, Allison. I'm calling because I had a damn awful experience. And yes, I expect something done about it. Is this how you handle things here, by mocking your customers?
Another cool feature is that you can get feedback on the specific responses that you've given and find out how you can improve. Have a look. Does sound strange. Could you give me your booking reference?
Of course, it's CCL 4321, but I'll be gobsmacked if it shows up with the correct details. If you manage that, you can probably solve the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle while you're at it.
So here we've got some feedback that we should work on our knowledge about the issues that the customer is facing. And if we click to find out more about our knowledgeable score, you can see we have some feedback here. So it's referenced the fact that we have requested the booking reference and asked the customer to describe the problem, but it says that we haven't provided them yet with any sort of concrete information or resources to help them understanding what's happening. What I'll do is get in touch with our technical team to have a look at what's happening with the online portal. Rest assured your booking will be kept in place so you won't be affected by this.
Well, isn't that a breath of fresh air? Finally a bit of progress. Make sure your tech team sorts it out, okay? Cheers!
And you can see our knowledgeable score has now gone up to 4 out of 5. So you can see how this type of simulation can be a really powerful tool for getting realistic practice in challenging situations.
All right, so this one was kind of the very first role play that we did, where we started understanding the kind of the broader power of the large language models to not only do kind of an interaction, but also manage the overall interaction that the learner is having. We've since extended this to cover a huge range of cases. We've done it in the sales area, sales arena, in pharmaceutical. We've done it, in the coaching area. We've done it technical interviewing. We've done it in kind of compliance around your kind of procurement procedures and so forth. You really can, the large language models can play effectively any role and give this kind of personalized organic practice. The other thing that we've seen this apply to, and we'll get to this in a little bit, is skills assessment, where when you can get a model interacting with learners in this exact way, you can also have the language model dial up a series of challenge problems of increasing or decreasing complexity to automatically pin learners at very specific skill levels within given skill categories that you're looking to assess. And so that's another very exciting area that relies on this same underlying technology. On the simulation front, I'll mostly show you transcripts here, as this is a project that we executed with a Big Four audit firm. I've had to do some violence to the interface, as you can see, just to be able to share it all. But I have cleaned up a transcript that I can share with you. This simulation is basically letting an auditor practice end-to-end audit of a client, a fictional client. And what that means is that the model is generating a very complicated and granular fact pattern that then the auditor has to sort of investigate and discover. And that includes creating all the backing financial information, playing all the roles of the client company, playing all the roles of the firm, and kind of everything around it, including rating and progress tracking and research that you need to do and so forth. A couple of key things about this, just to show you some of the more interesting things about the model. The first is that the model is able to give a deeply personalized kind of learning experience that reacts to wherever the learner is coming in from a skill level. So here I got into one of the initial runs through it, and I don't know anything about finance, and so I just said, what should I be looking at here? There's a number of unusually large transfer payments, the model comes back with. And in some dialogue with the large learning model, I came to find out that's basically a transfer payment is where one part of a company sells something to another part of the same company. And also that this is sort of a hotbed for funny business on the financial side that auditors spend a lot of time looking at. So I asked for the list. It gives me a complete list, and you'll see here, it looks reasonable. I took the very first one, the India subsidiary, and I don't know a lot about this, but I see that this is $112 million for royalties moving from the US to India, and that seems a little fishy to me. I mean, royalties aren't a real physical thing. So I said, give me transaction record. I get a transaction record. It doesn't tell me a lot more, as is often the case in this. So I just asked the model, it seems like these are pretty extreme IP royalty fees. Is there any chance this could be a mechanism for transferring profits from a high tax location to a low tax location? And the model comes back and gives me excellent kind of instruction around that. So yes, it could be, but you have to be careful. If they're at arm's length, it could be okay. You're going to need to look at these very specific things to make a determination. So if you think about that, I mean, it's really hard to accurately predict every little piece of information a learner might need as they go through a thing like this. The model can actually generate all of those bits and bobs of content that a learner is going to need in real time in what feels like very organic dialogue. Later on in this, I noticed that there was a huge cost spike in one particular office in one particular month. So here I asked for the SG&A expenses for that office, the Rio de Janeiro office. And you'll see I get a full accounting here. The thing I call about this is just the level of granularity that we get to. I mean, this is a lot of detail. I could get more. If I went into Amazon Brazil, office supplies, the first item there, and said, give me an itemized statement, it would tell me every paper clip and, snack pack or whatever that came in that Amazon shipment. In this run, I noticed lots of fun entertainment, which is a 544,000 US expense, for miscellaneous, for unexpected entertainment, and the name of the place, lots of fun, is pretty suspect. So I said, give me the full, the full report that was submitted on that. It can get down to that granular detail. You'll see it's got the transaction ID, the detailed breakdown of the expense, the approver, which was the CFO in this case, and some notes. And if you read the notes, they seem reasonable but not super convincing. And this is where kind of the role playing ability comes in. So in an audit, you very often have to go back to primary sources, that is people, and ask them to clarify, to help you understand what's really going on. So here I said, let me talk to Joseph Chen. And the model here plays Mr. Chen very well. And what's really fascinating about this is that it's not only kind of giving a stock portrayal of Mr. Chen, but it's clear that the model understands what Mr. Chen's footing would be in this exchange. So he's basically reading to me the notes from that original expense report, because he knows that there's maybe some funny business here and he's trying to be careful. But he also drops a couple of hints into the narrative, of other documents that I might want to look at, into communications and expense justifications and so forth. So the fact that the model can create this incredibly granular fact pattern, line it up with something at the top level, a kind of a bit of malfeasance that you're supposed to find, and that it can also then play every character accurately as they would play their own role, based on that enormous fact pattern. Lets us do a lot of interesting things. We've applied this to business simulations, strategy simulations, kind of sales and marketing, kind of strategy simulations, and we, again, as with a lot of the others here, we haven't really found the ends of them. So there's a lot of opportunity. We're sort of just scratching the surface right now. And so with that, I'm going to move into 10 solutions that we are currently working on. This is effectively our research agenda. We're already working actively with a couple of early adopters to do some of the things that I'm going to show you. I'd also like to say that we are looking for ambitious partners who want to do big enterprise-wide, kind of things with generative AI. So as I'm going through these, just please reach out if any of these kind of catch your eye, and look like they might be problems that you're trying to solve, and there might be a partnership opportunity with. So part of what Greg and I and the team have been doing over the research period here, in addition to building a lot of infrastructure to support all this and running a lot of experiments, we've been talking to a ton of clients. I mean, we're probably in the hundreds now of kind of high level learning and development folks we've talked to. And we've been taking notes and listening. And our consulting team at the same time has been doing the same thing as they're working with clients. And we've identified what we think are the kind of 10 biggest enterprise-wide issues that L&D faces. And these are those. I won't go through these in detail, but you can scan them really quickly and sort of see that they probably line up with some of the things that you're dealing with, or that you hear as kind of key issues that we're trying to solve. We've mapped against each one of these 10 enterprise-wide L&D issues solutions. So these are kind of services that we can now offer because of all the proof points we have in place, the kind of technical infrastructure we have behind it, and so forth, and that we're really looking for partners who want to do something big and ambitious around. And I'll walk through these one by one in more detail to explain kind of what's underneath the problem we're trying to solve, and what are the key kind of proof points that we think really make the shifts we need to transform that problem into a big success. We have sort of kept in mind the maturity model as we've been putting together all of these solutions. So this does offer a pathway for our client organizations to sort of move themselves up that maturity model and get to the top of the pyramid when all the technology is really in place to do it. And so with that, I'll kind of walk through each one of these problem solution sets, share our thinking around them, and hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes at the end for a little bit of discussion. So the first problem, essentially, new content takes too long to produce. So this is probably the number one thing we hear from everybody across the board, is that the business moves really quickly and we need to be a lot faster across L&D. The consequences here: training becomes a bottleneck to executing business initiatives, right? It's getting in the way of business, and it disrupts large-scale upskilling and reskilling initiatives. So those are big consequences. The net result of this, I think, from L&D's perspective, is that the business loses faith in L&D's ability to be an effective strategic partner. And that's a big consequence for all of us. So the solution here, we call it warp speed content fabrication. And the proof points that go into this are, the large language models have expert level knowledge of almost any training domain. That means that subject matter expert time can be collapsed to a matter of hours. And that's just never been the case before, and it removes a huge bottleneck. Large language models can apply standard instructional best practices and approaches. What this means is that the first draft of a detailed design is available essentially instantaneously. And you think about what the turnaround time for that often is, and it's a big change. LLMs can write content 20 times faster than human authors and can make rapid adjustments based on feedback. You put those two together, and iteration cycles from first draft to final product can be reduced to a matter of hours now. And if not hours, at most days. So when you just think about the level that shrinks timelines, shrinks turnaround, makes us more responsive and agile to our business partners, it's a really big deal. And then large language models can also do what we kind of refer to as the scripting work for layouts and illustrations and art and so forth. The actual kind of technology that actually generates those illustrations or generates those layouts is not quite where we want it to be yet, but the conceptualization time for UX can be shrunk to mere hours now. And you put all those together, and you're looking at something that is going to take sort of turnaround time in training and shrink it by 90% or more. So the ability to produce sort of simple things really quickly is really here today. We're in kind of final discussion right now with a big aerospace manufacturer about actually implementing this solution, and we have a lot of proof points in place from real project work where we've actually done this, and the results are extremely promising. Problem two. This is a really big one: excessive time to proficiency for new hire, new to role employees. This is probably the number one kind of noise generating problem that we hear about. The consequences are that employees learn on the job rather than training. Managers become de facto trainers. Job shock, when people actually hit the line, causes attrition, and productivity overall takes a hit. The net result for us in learning and development is that because training is perceived as not being effective, the business further reduces training time and resources, which just creates a vicious cycle. And I think a lot of the organizations we work with kind of feel that to some degree or another, and are struggling with that today. So the solution to this is the onboarding accelerator. And the key proof points on this one, and note a lot of the other ones that we'll talk about come along for the ride. Large language models can break a role down into key tasks and identify key challenges with each of those tasks. What that means is we can define precisely targeted practice scenarios without lengthy analysis and SME consultation. Huge time savings there. Large language models can create detailed scenario narratives specific to a learner's situation. What that means in practice is that we can ensure that the practice is situated in a realistic context. And situated learning is really critical. It's going to happen. So we'd really like to have it happen in training, and that's one of the key things to shrinking that time to proficiency. large language models can perform in-depth role plays and simulate complex systems. What that means is that we can simulate very closely the kinds of high pressure situations the learner will encounter on the job. And so if you think about, that kind of job shock issue, we can remove that essentially by giving people real practice before they actually experience the job. There are a number of clients are actually looking at, can we have this as part of our recruitment process so that we don't even bring people on who are really not good fits. And then finally, large language models can evaluate learner performance in real time and provide deeply personalized coaching and feedback. And what that means is that we can ensure that learners effectively reflect on what they're learning, understand what they need to, and reach full competency because of that. So when you take these things together and along with some of the things we said previously, we are at a point where we can create solutions that will shrink the training time while at the same time dramatically reducing the time to proficiency that you experience when you're actually putting folks out on the job. Problem 3, need to develop large-scale mastery of emerging skills for which little internal expertise is available. So this is, if you've ever been involved in an academy kind of project where you need to develop a new Gen AI academy or a new Wind academy or something like that. They're really challenging because you need that benchmarked information, and there are either very few people internally who have that knowledge and they're expensive and busy, or there's no one. So the consequences here, critical subject matter experts are tied up in training, which you don't want. Training may fail to get employees to global benchmarks. Poorly structured training programs may be assembled out of kind of curated content, which is often kind of a difficult thing for learners to wrap their heads around and apply to their own jobs. And then the net result here from kind of L&D's perspective is that the business's ability is hampered by the inability to create effective training in key emerging skills. So the business risks kind of falling behind on those skills. So the solution here is fast track academies. The proof points here from the large language model. The large language models are trained on material that crosses industry and geographical boundaries. And so what that means is just by what's already in the large language models, we can identify global benchmarks and standards for emerging skills. The large language models have comprehensive knowledge of the deep theories that underlie emerging skills, like from academic publications and so forth. What that means is we're able to rapidly construct programs that not only teach the how, but also the why, which is a big deal. Large language models are continuously trained on the latest knowledge. And so what that means is we're able to keep up with the speed of change in a way that was just never possible before. And then finally, large language models can ingest and make use of proprietary information related to the application of a particular skill. And so what that means is we can bring global best practices to bear while at the same time ensuring relevance to your organization's specific needs and applications, which is something that, again, has been a very difficult thing. I mean, some folks have managed it. It was incredibly time consuming and costly, and that's just not going to be the case going forward. Problem 4, difficulty of identifying performance gaps in the field and addressing them in training. So the consequence, similar mistakes may get made repeatedly due to lack of training to address the underlying problem. And 2, even when mistakes are called out to learners, there's often no solution offered through training other than, don't let this happen to you, which doesn't really help learners that much. And the net result is a general failure to achieve continuous improvement through training. And it's a really big issue. It means that we're kind of in L&D often viewed as sort of stagnant, a little bit behind. We're sort of not keeping up with the pace of those emerging challenges the business is experiencing. So here, the solution is Mastery Maker. It's essentially a flight simulator for all key roles. So imagine giving everybody deeply personalized, kind of practice around key skills, around the key challenges they're going to face and so forth. So the proof points, large language models contain baseline knowledge about typical mistakes and performance gaps in specific industries and geographies, and we've yet to find one this isn't true of. We can anticipate and work to remediate mistakes even before they've happened in your organization. So that's a really big shift. Large language models can rapidly analyze field data on performance, e.g. incident reports, near miss reports, and identify patterns of mistakes inside those field reports. So what that means is that we can prioritize current issues in the field and address them with specific training interventions. The large language models can perform root cause analysis on mistake sequences. That means that we can deconstruct the underlying issues behind mistakes and address them at that root cause level. So, no more superficial training. We can actually get at what's driving the mistakes. And then finally, large language models can take mistake patterns and root cause analysis and produce practice scenarios to teach learners the best practices to avoid those mistakes. This means that we can ensure that learners are able to confront and learn to manage situations in which mistakes are likely to happen in the safe training environment. And this is a really big deal because this, again, used to be an area that consumed enormous kind of resources when you tried to do it in the real world, and led to very, very long timelines relative to what you'd ideally have. And that problem with generative AI in our experience is basically gone now. Moving on to problem 5. AI is massively disrupting L&D. We need a new playbook to deal with it. This is probably the number one thing we've heard from the CLO level as we've talked to a bunch of CLOs over the past couple of years. The consequences of this: L&D personnel are uncertain about their futures, big deal. L&D leaders are unsure where to invest. Opportunities may be missed if L&D organizations cannot quickly pivot to utilize AI. And the net result is that many L&D organizations are at risk of falling behind. L&D isn't necessarily the top priority for generative AI from kind of an IT perspective. And so they're kind of waiting in queue. And while they are, the technology just keeps getting better and better. So the solution here we call AI Ready L&D strategy. This is a consulting engagement. Our expert AI consultants are top of trends and emerging best practices in the use of AI and L&D. So we can help you sort through all the hype and find the technologies that will actually work for your organization. Our consultants bring a wealth of experience in working with organizations like yours in learning. So we can help you to create a roadmap for integrating AI across your L&D value chain. Our consultants have deep expertise in the business side of L&D. That means we can help you create a business case for the investments you need to make. And then our consultants are also integrated very deeply with our service teams, which means that we can smoothly transition from planning to execution of your AI strategy. This one's a little bit different than the others, but we do think this is a key thing that a lot of folks are struggling with today. And we do think we've kind of put the resources in place to help out with this one. Problem 6, regulations, technologies, and best practices change so rapidly that our content can't keep up. This is one we hear almost uniformly when we talk to folks. The consequences, sort of obviously, content is often out of date, risking compliance violations and other serious consequences. Content updates are often addressed in a superficial, suboptimal way, just to get them in there and kind of cover our bases. And then the L&D team spends time on updating content rather than on creating new content, which is obviously suboptimal. The net result is that change becomes a limiting factor in overall training quality, because we're putting all this effort into just getting things, kind of in line with current reality. We're missing all that opportunity we would have to make the things that we're developing even better. So the proof points here, I think a lot of the proof points you've already seen sort of obviously tie in here, but LLMs are continuously trained on publicly accessible information such as regulations and emerging best practices. What this means is that we can anticipate where content will need to change due to external factors. Large language models can rapidly assimilate and analyze proprietary information related to new technologies, practices, et cetera. So this means that anything that you have internally that maybe the model doesn't know about, large language models can actually understand and incorporate. That means we can anticipate where content will need to change due to internal factors. Large language models can quickly identify where a body of content needs to change to reflect an underlying change in industry standards. What that means is we can keep content evergreen by continuously updating it as things change, as opposed to waiting for kind of hard triggers to happen. Problem 7, we subscribe to numerous training catalogs with expensive licenses and questionable ROI. This is another one that we hear really almost uniformly, and we've actually implemented this solution in a number of clients already. The consequences of this problem, L&D pays for large catalogs, a small number are actually used. Catalog content is mostly generic, so learners complain about irrelevance. We've done very large user studies on this exact topic that have confirmed this absolutely. And the organization pays every year rather than once to develop the content, which is just this kind of drain on the overall kind of budget that they have to do more high value, more specialized training that needs to happen. The net result, significant budgets that could be put to use more effectively elsewhere are tied up in training with dubious effectiveness. So the solution here, again, a lot of this kind of flows out as the proof points we saw before, but we call this the catalog debt eliminator. LLMs can rapidly analyze usage data. That means we can quickly determine which courses the organization really needs. Large language models can rapidly and cheaply create replacement content for catalog courses. That means we can provide the equivalent impact to catalog training for a price that might not be much more than a year's subscription. And then finally, large language models can customize training to your organization and your learner's environment, which means we can deliver training with more relevance and higher impact than your typical catalog content can. Problem 8, we're shifting to a skills-based approach, but how do I tell which employees really have what skills? This is where our clients are really moving aggressively into becoming skills-based organizations. This is the #1 problem we hear about. It's by a large gap. The consequences, in some cases, organizations miss on talent that they have because they have no way to identify it. On the other side, organizations assume talent that isn't really there based on self-reporting. Practical evaluation of skills is expensive and difficult to perform. The net result here is that many organizations are largely flying blind when it comes to mapping the skills of their workforce, which obviously impacts almost everything from kind of talent planning to staffing, to projecting what training is needed. It's kind of everywhere along the chain. This is a big issue. So our solution here is the Practical Skills Assessor. The Practical Skills Assessor we have up and running. Basically, it is a way in which a large language model can be used to create rubrics, detailed rubrics for different skills, can then interview essentially a learner to pose challenge problems, practical challenge problems at different levels of the rubric, and then help determine in an evidence-based way what the real skills are for what the real skill levels are for each learner and each key skill they need to be practicing. So it's a very cool thing. The proof points, large language models can perform practical evaluations of competence for almost any recognizable skill, and we've done a ton of experiments here and some real project work. What that means is we can verify skill levels across all employees using AI. LLMs can utilize industry benchmarks and company-created rubrics in the evaluation of skill levels. That means we can ensure consistent evaluation that matches what human experts would determine in your specific company. Large language models can coach and counsel employees on where their gaps are on a given skill and how they could improve. So this takes it beyond just assessment to actually remediation. We can not only identify hidden skills and match them to roles, we can help develop skills that might be useful across the organization. And then finally, large language models can help formulate skills taxonomies and rubrics for evaluation. This means we can expand the set of recognized skills that your company is able to identify and tap into. So a lot of very exciting things there. Problem #9, we know people learn better with personal coaching, but there is no practical way to deliver it. The consequences, almost all curricula suffer from a one-size-fits-all problem. Employees often end up taking content that isn't that relevant for them. When employees fail to learn from a course, there is little or no remedy. And according to Bloom, direct tutoring produces a 2 sigma improvement in performance over standard training. We're not realizing that improvement. And the net result here is really that we could be having a much greater impact if only we had the resources to do it, to offer that personal tutoring and coaching. So solution here is the personal AI coach. And the proof points, large language models are able to have a Socratic learning dialogue with individual learners. That means we're able to have AIs tutor learners individually, personally. Large language models can create learning paths on the fly in response to the learner's specific goals. That means we can avoid a one-size-fits-all approach and train learners on the skills they really need to master. Large language models can give learners appropriate problems to solve and coach them through the solutions. That means we can train learners in an optimal problem-based way on any skill they require. Large language models can role play and simulate behavior of complex systems in response to learner inputs. That means we can actually use on-the-fly simulation to build proficiency on target skills. And large language models can learn about the individual learner they're coaching. That means we can deliver totally personalized training that is optimized to the individual learner in a way that's never possible before. And I mean, just to back out for 1 second before I move on to the final solution, in Bloom's research that he did around the 2 sigma problem, I mean, just to make it a little bit more concrete, in case you're not familiar with it, what he found is that when people got one-size-fits-all kind of training, let's say that put them at the kind of 50th percentile. When he applied personalized tutoring and coaching to that same learning program, those learners moved from the 50th percentile to the 98th percentile. That's the performance gap that we can realize right now through personal AI coaching. So the impact, if you can imagine all of your 50th percentile performers suddenly being 98th percentile performers, is a really, really, really big deal, I think, from a business impact standpoint. And then problem 10, our organization is drowning in data, but we have few insights to show for it. The consequences, we don't have a firm grasp on what is working and what's not. We are almost certainly missing opportunities to optimize. We are failing to see patterns of behavior that we might be able to address with learning interventions if we're able to identify them. And the net result, we want to be driven, we want to be data-driven, but in reality, we mostly are not. And so solution here we refer to as the L&D Insight Factory. We do have this up and running for a number of clients. The idea here is that lots of organizations have a huge amount of data. Maybe they already have a data lake. Maybe they already have dashboards. Kind of wherever you are in that journey, we can help you through that. But the key piece here is that even when you have a dashboard set up, it's a lot of numbers and it's a lot of information, and it's really, really hard to make sense of. And we hear this from everyone. So the big idea behind the L&D Insight Factory is to take the large language model, generative AI, kind of put it as a layer over the top of that data, so that we can start getting priorities, we can start getting actionable insights, we can start understanding what we need to do as opposed to just raw data, and start making better data-driven decisions and take better data-driven actions. And I'll proof points on this one. Large language models can aggregate large sets of diverse data into coherent narratives, which means we can integrate data from different sources that use different representations and still create a coherent data picture. Large language models can summarize massive quantities of information in ways that are easily digestible. That means we can give our experts real-time insights that do not require them to do massive amounts of data analysis. Large language models are aware of global standards and benchmarks across almost all industries, disciplines, and geographies. We say almost only because we've never seen it fail. But maybe there'll be a surprise someday. That means we can not only analyze your own data, we can get a sense of how we stack up against other organizations, which is a really big deal if you want to opt into sort of benchmarking. LLMs can rapidly scan massive quantities of data and identify the highest priority elements, which means we can separate critical insights from mundane observations, which is the real big problem here when you're looking at data. And then large language models can generate suggested actions based on analytics. What this means is that we can really go straight from insight to action without a lot of the deliberation that typically happens along the way. So that gets through today's presentation. Just kind of summary again of the sort of 10 biggest problems that we're looking to solve with these big joined up enterprise-wide use cases. And with that, we have a couple of minutes left if there were any questions in the chat or anything like that, be happy to cover those now.
Right. So there was a question in the chat from David, which said, did the model actually create the articulate files templates or just the content and suggestions for interactive?
Just the content. But the key thing there is that, from the way we're set up, the creation of the articulate asset is about 4 hours of effort out of a very large set of other efforts that need to happen. So not quite there on the actually directly producing the articulate content. We do have tools internally that can automatically generate content in a very large number of formats. Those are kind of built on top of the ADAPT framework, and you can get from that to articulate. So that's a completely automated end-to-end solution. But the experiment that we saw there was very early days and was really just getting the script done so that our creative could put together the full course.
Great. We don't have any other questions as of now. If there are questions, please feel free to, email us with them and we'll be happy to address them for you.
And if you'd like to talk more about any one of them, how something like one of these could actually be configured in your environment, or if you have cases that weren't covered here that you'd like to talk about, we'd love to talk to you. So please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, thank you all.
Thank you all for joining us. Bye.